What is that?
It's a book for determining traffic counts for uses, so that since we have a traffic counter, it helps to know what type of use to expect, and it's helpful for the planning department.
Okay. If you had just said that, I wouldn't have had to ask the question. I didn't know it had anything to do with the traffic counter.
Well, it's not specific to the traffic counter. It's a book that tells you traffic counts for uses.
I thought it was something that you were going to put in the truck, like a log to keep keep a count of where the truck was going. So okay.
Literally the book.
And we do have, what do we currently have in checking and savings? Dana? 8,200,000 something.
We have total checking and savings is, that's June 30th, when we go to the current one. As of November 3rd, we had 8.2 million, 8.27.
Okay, 8.27. Are we going to have to cash in any CDs to pay for any capital projects?
I'm foreseeing that we will potentially, and I'm going to drag that out as long as I can. And the reason for that, let me just explain one thing. The interest on our CDs is on paper. We don't actually see it because it goes right back into our CDs, which is great because we earn interest and then that interest earns 5% and that interest earns 5%. So we don't get use of those funds. So even though you'll see, these large amounts of revenues on our financials, we don't get access to that money to actually spend it. So we were eventually going to run into issues, potentially, even if we didn't do some of this construction, we may potentially have run into issues where we would have been out of cash or other funds and we would have had to have drawn down some of those funds. And of course, it would just depend on spending, and I haven't done that calculation to see if we would have needed it by the time the CDs matured, but more than likely we probably would have. But with the construction that council has approved, we're going to probably have to dip into it. Now, one thing we did consider was going out to the banks to get loans, and we can get a loan rate cheaper than the CD rate. So we keep earning the high CD rate and pay a loan rate lower. And at first, the banks, last time I reported to you, the banks said they weren't interested, and I think the one that did respond was higher. We have received one that was lower. So it's just a matter of when we incur the debt. We don't need it now, but if that bank is still interested in the future, we do not have to go to LGC for approval for an amount under $500,000. So we could do potentially 2 small $490,000 loans, and we'll still wind up ahead.
And still make money.
Yeah, because we'll be making money and the loan rate will be lower. Of course, that depends on the economy between now and then, whether that bank's still interested and how much we'll need and when we'll need it.
And if you should have to cash in a CD, is there going to be a penalty?
No.
You will be able to work that out.
That
You're
was
so good. I know you would
well
do that.
I'll threaten legal action if they try it. That was what was quoted to us. So the negotiations when we did the CDs was that we could take the money out after 6 months on some and after 12 months on others without penalty, and we have long passed those 6 and 12-month points. Now, when I talked to the bank, the person was clueless about, the person that offered that is no longer there. The person that I talked to about it never heard of such a thing. She asked if I had the paperwork, and I said, of course I do. So it may just be a matter of a discussion with the higher-ups at the bank, and then some threats if necessary, but they will honor that. She said just as long as I had the paperwork, she didn't think it'd be an issue. And in terms of that as well, if we do cash in those CDs, we do not have to cash in the whole thing. So if we need $200,000, we can still keep the 5% intact for the amount that we do not need at the current time. So that was good to hear because, of course, we'll take the lower rate CD and we'll start there.
So you can take the 4.64
Yes.
first?
Yes.
Okay.
So we'll start there and we'll take only what we need when we need it, and we'll just keep digging into it and try to put it off as long as we can. And so right now we're using that 1.4 million that's still in the Newbridge money market, and good thing we're still earning 1.5% on that, which is still higher than the CD rates out there. The CD rates out there are less than 1%. We're earning 1.5 on our money market, so we're using that to fund ball field right now.
That's all I have.
All right, the question I had budget discussions and Parks and Rec programming. When we had our budget discussions, you had asked the committee, the Parks and Rec committee, to come up with amounts for each program, their expenses for each program, and you asked them to build a budget based on that. What I did for Parks and Rec, if you look at the financials, is that I separated out the budget for Parks and Rec programs into individual programs so they can actually see where they stand on each program. Now, the question I have for council is, what is my authority in terms of moving those funds? Based on the procedures we have in place and the ordinances we have in place, I am allowed to move within line items. But I did not want to do that without talking to council, because council expressed a change from that during the budget process, meaning they wanted to make sure that Parks and Rec had budgets and stayed within those budgets. So I wanted to ask, what is my authority in terms of the Parks and Rec programming? If they do not spend all the money on one program, can they then do a bigger program for another program that they have planned? And so what authority do you want to give me to do finance officer amendments as necessary? And it's really not even, well, I guess I would do a finance officer amendment because that's how we built the budget. So I would do it to notify you what we've done. And then my other question on top of that is, if they've raised funds, if they've raised $500, are you giving them approval to spend more for their program? Because they've raised funds for additional things. Because sometimes they may raise it in advance with the intent that they want to do a bigger program. Or somebody has offered, I'll give you this so that we can make the program bigger and better. So what are your thoughts on all of that?
It's a question of if they raise funds, how they raise funds. We budgeted $1,500 for the Halloween event.
Yes.
And then there was $700 in donations, half went to SYC, half went to Parks and Rec. Well, do they consider that funds raised, or do they have to wait until they match what the town has already budgeted before they can consider that funds raised? Does it go back to the town? Or are they allowed to use it as funds raised, even though the town has already given them $1,500?
And that's my question to you. How would you like to handle it? I guess the first part is, will you let them fudge between, and I'm sorry I'm using a public housing term there, most people haven't heard of fungibility. It's a, and I don't even think it's a true term, it's a HUD term. Can they fudge between line items, for instance, that they know that this Parks and Rec program, they came under budget $300, so that can they then use that for another program? And what are your thoughts there?
I would say, simply thinking of that, if you feel that's a good thing to do, Dana, and you recommend it, I mean, we've approved what's in the budget. We've approved what they do with the budget. So what you're asking is, if they underspend on one thing, can they use that money for something else to increase programming that's more than what we approved?
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
But how does that keep people from being accurate in their budget requests? If they know that, suppose, you know, this event is going to cost $1,500 and they ask for $2,000, thinking that they can use that extra money for something else.
I don't think they would allow that to happen. I mean, I think you have to base it on what they've done in the past, or what they projected, and I don't think anybody should be doing that budget that way. They should think it's going to cost that much. Now, what I understood you to say was they got some money from somewhere else, or somebody gave them extra, so they had more money that they didn't spend on that one thing because of something else, and they wanted to know if they could use that money to increase what they did. I think what I would like to see would, if that happened, that they would present something to the manager to bring to the council or whatever, or to you, if you want to do it, just saying what the increase would be used for, so council's aware of it if it's different from what we approved in the budget.
Because, and you know, the Halloween